Well, hello, fans, and good evening. Welcome back to the Hockey Writers Live. It is December the 22nd already. I mean, who would have thought that we'd be just a couple days in front of Christmas and 2020 is almost over, finally. But we really do appreciate you joining us tonight for the next hour. We've got two really special guests for you. We're going to have our site owner, Bruce Hollingdrake, join us in the second half of the show. But right now, we're going to spend 30 good minutes with a good friend of mine who now covers the Florida Panthers for Fox Sports Florida and who used to be up here where I'm at in Erie, Pennsylvania. Katie Gaus, welcome to the Hockey Writers Live.
Mark, thank you so much for having me. It's
Uh,
certainly not the reunion we expected, but very, very good to see you again.
Great to see you as well. And we really appreciate you taking the time to join us. So, just first off, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I mean, you mentioned it, 2020. It's been quite a year, but despite all of the changes, I've been hanging in there, finding ways to keep busy, and very fortunate to be with the Panthers organization because they've really taken good care of all of us. And I've still got my job, and I've still got plenty to do. And now hockey's almost back, so it's only going to get busier.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, and we were sitting there for the longest time wondering when are we ever going to get hockey back? Like we just kept hearing report after report after report. Really not a lot of substance, but things are really starting to pick up now. And finally, we have that light at the end of the tunnel once and for all.
January, we used to say, is it October yet? So now is it January yet? It can't come soon enough.
No, it cannot. But hey, I don't care that it's a short season. Let's just bring the hockey back, bring back a little bit of normal. Let's flip out of 2020 and let's just look forward.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So, what have you actually done to kill time now? I know, at least from my point of view, I've told everybody it's been all about like the Nintendo Switch and movies and Netflix and things. What have you been able to do to kill time?
Well, I've certainly binged a couple shows, but for me, actually, the best part about being in Florida is that there has been the opportunity to get outside and stay socially distant while still doing some fun things. So I've actually done a lot of fishing. I'm a big fisherman. My family was able to get a boat last year, so we've been spending a lot of time out on the water, soaking up the sunshine, and just trying to do some fishing. Got a couple good ones on the line. A few that got away. Otherwise,
Of course.
keeping myself busy with work. I mean, we're trying to launch a new podcast with the Panthers. I actually was able to start a new show with the team called The Plain Truth, which is a kind of a behind the scenes look at some of the cool things happening with the team in South Florida. It's a little bit more of a fun, fast paced social media style show. So it's been, there's no hockey, but we've still been busy. It's kind of crazy. We've just found new ways to be busy. You've almost
Hmm.
been busier because you have to get so creative finding ways to make content these days. But certainly had enough on my plate to keep me covered.
Now, for those that don't know, has the show started already or?
Yeah, so it's called The Plain Truth. You can get to it on the Panthers YouTube channel. We're actually heading into our final episode for the first season of it, but it's sponsored by JetBlue. That's why it's kind of got a unique name, but
Yep.
it's a fun show, fast paced, just short content that I've really enjoyed making, and it's kind of trying to reach out to a different fan base because in South Florida we've got quite a variety of hockey fans and different cultures to bring into the fold. So we've been having some fun with it.
And yeah, a little bit off the board with this one, but I think it's a good segue because that is an interesting market because it's a warm weather climate, but yet there's a little bit of a passionate hockey base down there. So like what are the Panthers actually doing to try to, maybe expand down there, or even bring more fans into BB&T Center?
Absolutely. I think we really try to turn all of our games into a fun, family event. So it's not, maybe just about the hockey. It's about the experience. It's about no matter what you're coming to the BB&T Center for, you're going to leave having had fun. So we're
Mhm.
really working on that. And then I got to give credit to our community relations with all of the learn to play programs. We've got our own players going out doing learn to play segments, getting the kids excited, visiting all the different schools and telling them about the game. So it
Mhm.
certainly isn't maybe their first choice of sport, but we've made strides over the years. And I mean, you can look at the NHL now. You're starting to see those first few players who are originally coming from Florida. That Florida hockey is becoming somewhere that you can be successful, even coming out of this warm weather.
Yeah, there are, and as of late, absolutely, there are a few players, prospects. Andrew Peak is somebody on the Blue Jackets who's originally down in Florida, and there's a lot of players that are just they're able to get into the game. And I think having the Tampa Bays of the world, having the Floridas of the world, having a presence down there is really making a huge difference in that state.
Absolutely. And now we just need to get a cup, because once you win a cup, hockey always blows up. We've seen that. Tampa had it. It happened in Pittsburgh when I was growing up. So I mean, certainly when you win, it makes it even easier.
It kind of brings back memories of the mid 90s Panthers when they made that run to the Stanley Cup final and all the rats coming out of the ice and that building was always buzzing. So it seems like that if they are able to find a way to build a winner, they're going to really, enjoy some success again. Just a matter of time, it seems.
I think so too. Yeah, we feel good about it, especially with our new leadership in place. I think it's
Mhm.
going to be from here, but we've got it under control.
And we're going to touch on that leadership here in a little bit, but in getting to know you a little bit before you got down there, I think one of the more interesting career paths, you spent time as a local sportscaster here in Erie, doing all kinds of sports, but you were also, with the Erie Otters, and you got to cover them a lot too. So, just can you talk about that experience being a sportscaster? How has that helped you get to where you're at now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, everyone always says it's so important to be well rounded and to know how to do everything, even if you don't end up having to do all of those things. When I was working in Erie, it was my first job out of college. So I was as green as it gets. And, I've been working with, someone ahead of me who was doing it for 30 years. So there was a big wisdom gap there, but just was able to soak up so much from that experience. And also a big part of it was just learning to work under pressure. Live TV, especially in a market where you're basically doing everything by yourself. I'd be running a live shot on a camera, adjusting my lighting, and reporting all at the same time. So if I can run my own camera and deal with that much chaos, then when I don't have to do all those things, it makes me feel like I'm a pro. I can do anything. So certainly learning how to thrive under all of that pressure, and then being able to have it taken away, and it definitely makes you feel like you can handle just about anything.
And rest assured, I have seen her in action when she was doing Otter stuff, and she did everything from camera to interviews. It got to be a little hustle bustle sometimes, but
Yeah,
really, really good at what she did. So it's uh, good wisdom, especially if you're looking to get into that career. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that are looking for a break or looking for a way in. So if you can be good at a lot of things, that could potentially be a way in to the hockey world.
absolutely. And then the other thing is just that it's all about networking, knowing
Yep.
people. And the hockey world is so small. Look at us. Here we are. We're
Mhm.
just another example of how who you meet and who you know is always important. And, I went from one job to another, and then here I am. You never know what the path is going to look like. But if you
Yep.
keep in touch, it surprises you sometimes.
It's rule number one, and I tell that to everybody the same thing. It's all in who you know. The more you know, the more people you know, that's going to open your door. Because if you're choosing between somebody you know and somebody fresh off the street, it's pretty easy. You're going to go with familiarity.
Yep.
End of
Absolutely.
the day. Katie Gaus from Fox Sports Florida and the Florida Panthers joining us here. We're going to talk about the hockey team now. So, you brought up earlier with the leadership, and you're getting somebody that I know very well in Bill Zito, who was the former assistant general manager with the Columbus Blue Jackets, now is the general manager of the Florida Panthers. So he's off to a pretty tremendous start. He's already made quite a few moves here, but I'm curious to know, what do you think he needs to prioritize, especially in this first year, to really put his stamp on the team?
I think he's already started to do it. I mean, I think he basically made a point of doing it with his very first move, and that was the
Mhm.
big trade with Patrick Hornquist coming from Pittsburgh, with
Yep.
Matheson and Sevier leaving. He wants to shift the culture. And Hornquist is about as culture driven as you get. He's the guy that's going to come in and just completely change the entire locker room. He's tough to play against. He's the hardest working guy on the ice at any given moment. I just think bringing a guy like that in was a kind of a sign to the rest of the group, like, all right, I'm making a statement with this one, and this guy's not going to let anybody take any days off. And then he followed it up with, guys like Gudis and Lomberg with that little bit of grit, maybe some toughness. The Panthers, potentially a team that was too easy to play against or push around at times.
Mhm.
That's not going to be happening this year. Even old Samuelson joining on the bench is going to definitely provide a little bit of a toughness aspect that this
Yeah.
may not have seen before. So for Bill Zito, I think the moves are already well in place, and we're going to see a much different style Panthers hit the ice.
Yeah, and then there's a couple other guys that they were able to bring in too, and a couple other guys that, with Columbus being familiar with Alexander Wenberg at center, Marcus Nunavera on the defense, and they just recently brought Anthony Duclair in, which he's going to be very interesting because when he's right, he can really fill the net. Like he really streaky, can be really good at one moment, really bad at other moment. It just what do you where do you feel like that each of those guys fit into the Panthers?
Well, to start for Wenberg, I feel like he was a guy who, had success, sort of lost his way, and really just needed a change of scenery. And
Hmm.
Panthers is a place that was so eager and wanted him. And when a player knows that he's wanted, I feel like that makes a huge difference. He knows coming here that he's going to get opportunities and he could be the second line center, if things work out according to the kind of projections I'm seeing right now. I think he could really find that offensive spark and kind of jumpstart this second half of his career because he really is young and still going into that prime. There's so many of these new signings that are guys that it sounds like they've been around for a while, but they're not. They're
Hmm.
young. They still have so much prime career ahead of them. And so I see Wenberg really having an opportunity to make an impact there on the offensive side. Like you
Yep.
said, Blair is an extremely interesting one. He's been so well traveled for a guy his age.
Yep.
But with this opportunity, he could potentially see himself lining up on the offside with Barkov and Huberto. I mean, you can't really give a player a better chance to prove himself than if you put him in that situation. So I think with the
Hmm.
1 year deal, it's really going to be a put up or shut up kind of a situation. And ultimately it's up to him. But he sounds like from the conversations that we've already had with him, very eager, very excited. Another player who's just, looking for a place to be wanted and prove himself. So
Hmm.
if that's the right fit. I definitely think the team is excited to have him.
Yeah, and you can't discount the Bill Zito effect either in knowing Wenberg and
Yes,
knowing Nuda Vera too. He was willing to go out and bring them in on pretty good. I mean, you want to look at it from a Panthers perspective. Those are some really good deals that they were able to get them on.
yes, absolutely. I know we didn't even talk about Nudavara, but with the kind of salary dump that Columbus was looking to do, bringing
Yep.
two-way defenseman, someone with experience, someone who's responsible. That's really what we need. We brought in some grit. We need some responsibility. So I think he has another, really good opportunity to sort of redefine his career and be a very, very good asset, especially because defense is so important right now for us.
Yeah, and Nuda Vera too. For Panthers fans that are watching this, I can give you a little bit. He played top four at times.
Yeah.
The issue became there was an established top four in Columbus. So when he got his chance, he was either in the bottom two or he was a healthy scratch. But he got opportunities to play up, especially when there were injuries. And there were flashes where he belonged. It's just the consistency thing. And I think going into a new situation, and some people have their thoughts on John Tortorella and how a player might act with him. Maybe him going to a Joel Quenneville, maybe he'll relax him. Maybe that'll apply to Wenberg as well. So I think you brought up that great point earlier about going into a new opportunity, going into a fresh situation. And now that they might have to play each other 8 times coming up here, there might be some motivation on their shoulders too.
100%. I completely agree. It's certainly going to be it's going to be interesting because they have such a short window to adjust to this whole new squad. But I think that all the players are as motivated as they can be, which is going to make a big difference.
Yep. About quarter after 8 here. So if you're just tuning in, it is the Hockey Writers Live. I am your host, Mark Scheig. And this week we have Katie Gaus from Fox Sports Florida and the Florida Panthers talking about the Cats. And keeping on the Columbus theme, got to talk about the goaltending. And we have Sergei Bobrovsky going into his second year, where last year from the outside, he definitely had his struggles. It seemed like there was certainly an adjustment that he was going through. What can we expect to see from him? And is there a hope and a confidence that he can regain his form?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's no secret that, this past season, Bob was not the Vesna Bob that we know from some of those seasons that he was in Columbus. But I think the biggest thing to take away was that, like you mentioned, he clearly needed to make some adjustments. He went from having one of the most shut down, shot blocking defensive groups in front of him because we know how Tortorella likes his defense to play, to a Panthers team who defensively was struggling and was still really trying to find their way. So you throw in a goalie who is expected to be this all-star based on his history and his contract. He's still a human being and there were still adjustments that needed to be made. And so for Bob, there were games where he did fight it a bit, but I also feel like there were also, a lot of games he wasn't getting the help he deserved because he
Mhm.
maybe didn't make the biggest saves he was maybe, you're used to seeing, but he made timely saves. And there were plenty of games where he really was keeping him in it, but it was overshadowed. I gotta say, I just, from seeing him, and I know you'll know this as well, but no one is more dedicated to the game and to the craft of goaltending than Bobrovsky. He works
100%.
harder than anyone. He is
Yep.
riding that bike for 90 minutes or something crazy after games. Like, we're waiting to get on the plane because he's still doing a post-game workout. And I know with this off season, the Panthers developed our goaltending excellence department, which is
Hmm.
something we're really excited about. So he's going to have the opportunity to work with them, with Tallis, with Francois Olaire, with Luongo, and I think that combined with going into his second year is going to really build the confidence, and I think we are going to see much more of what we expect from Bobrovsky.
And I think a lot of it too was the emotional impact of leaving a city that he was with for a long time. Being able, you went into a new environment, you knew that he was going to obviously try his best and everything, but it just turned out that you're right. They didn't have the defense that they had in Columbus, and just there's always an adjustment period. This offseason, he doesn't have to worry about that. He gets to go right in, short season. He's the clear number one. He's going to have an opportunity to prove that he's still really good. And I can definitely vouch for the stories that you said. Just 2 minutes after a game, he's already on the bike. And by the time we're done with everything, he's still on the bike. He's still stretching, just everything. He is the consummate professional. And that's something that a lot of fans don't see. And, I can see why a lot of Panther fans are, like, bring a Spencer Knight now, but Sergei Bobrovsky, I think, is due for a huge rebound this year. Really do.
Absolutely. And even when you look at the end of last season, obviously cut short, he was getting stronger. He
Hmm.
came back from his little time off with the All-Star break and the injury, and he made some really strong improvements. So I think the best is definitely yet to come with Bob in Florida.
And he's definitely a late season goalie too. Like, if you look at his career, like if you look at it from a regular season standpoint, like October, November, he gets much better as the season goes on. I think his March record is just insane
Yep.
because he really does take the time after the All-Star break. And I just think that his conditioning allows him to be so good that late in the year where maybe other players kind of break down a little bit depending on, how they do. So a lot to look forward there, like you said. So you brought up we've talked about the defense a couple of times. And again, just from an outsider's point of view, it seemed like that it was a little bit of an area of struggle, but there are some pieces in place. Like Aaron Ekblad is somebody that I've always been a fan of his game. Keith Yandle is still there and some other pieces. What do you think the team has to do to shore up that defense and maybe make life easier for Bob and for themselves?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it goes back to some of the acquisitions that we discussed, and bringing in a guy like Gudis who's going to, make the jobs of the teams that are coming in more difficult, and of course Nudavara as well.
Mhm.
Re-signing Mackenzie Weegar was another major moment for Panthers fans this summer because he's become a really reliable fan favorite and just an enjoyable story as well. Anytime that you can have a guy coming from a seventh round draft pick to being on your top pair defensively is just something that you like to see, and it shows great scouting and it shows good organizational communication. So having Uyghur back, I'm looking forward to. I think he'll have some experience and grit to kind of combine with some of the guys we've acquired and really add that bolstering grit to the blue line.
Mhm.
For me, I think it ultimately will be a bit of a culture thing as well. We don't have a ton of guys that were always laying out the body. That was Uyghur was doing that. We'd had Achari doing that when he would be on the penalty kill. So for me, I think that the culture of putting everything out there every single game will trickle down and will really make an impact on the defense, especially combining that with a lot of these new acquisitions. And we have a new, obviously Mike Kitchen departing. He handled a lot of our defense, so we'll have some new coaching in place there as well. And
Mhm.
Coach Hughes entering his second year, so I think there will be a new familiarity with everyone, in terms of the systems, and hopefully that clarity will translate into a little bit more of a smooth defensive game for the Panthers.
And a little bit off the board here too, but you mentioned coaching and you being there day in and day out, you get to talk to Joel Quenneville. Can you just give fans a sense of what he's like to deal with and just I know I've been able to talk to him on a couple of occasions when he's been through Columbus, and he seems very thoughtful when you give the right question. Just what's your firsthand experience of dealing with Joe Quenneville?
He's just an incredible human being. I mean, I have interviewed a lot of coaches over the course of my career, and none have just come off as just so impressive, but also kind. It takes a lot to get him in into a bad place in terms of interviews, despite the game. Every time I've talked to him, he was thoughtful.
Mhm.
He's reflective, and he gives really, really, good answers to just about any question. Just a really impressive person to be around. I mean, just to watch him, on the
Mhm.
ice, to see him the way he interacts with the players, and honestly, the most exciting part is to the passion when he wins, and I get to stand in that hallway. Well, not anymore, but when I would stand in that hallway and he'd come right off the ice, he's the first guy off into the locker room, fist bumping everybody, giving the jabs. I mean, he loves to win, and it's really contagious. And I mean, it really does translate to the team. And when he's fired up, it's about as fun as anything you'll see. But just a legend, and to see him be what he is as a legend and still
Mhm.
be such a good person makes
Yep.
it more special.
Absolutely. And the Panthers too, along with everybody else, are going into new division setups this year. I can't wait to really see how this goes. Where in the case of the Central, 8 games against everybody, where you play 4 at home, 4 on the road, etc. Just I know from a Blue Jackets perspective, and if you they're getting away from the Metro, getting away from like the Flyers, the Penguins, the Capitals, that's a help for them. For the Panthers, is that Tampa Bay is still going to be there, but there's a few teams that you're familiar with, but then there's going to be some newcomers. Is that a help in your mind for the Panthers, and does that bode well for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you mentioned it. It's the same situation as Toronto's in, getting away from some of those metro teams is how I feel the Panthers are benefiting, getting
Mm,
away from Boston, getting away from Toronto, getting away from these teams that, like you mentioned, we're still stuck with the Tampa Bay Lightning, but those are teams that are tough games and wear you down over the course of a season, and are struggles. So while you're getting new opponents, I do think that those fresh matchups are going to really make a difference. Like you said, 8 games against each of the teams. The nice thing being that, there is no wild card now. You need to be the top four. Can you be the top four? That's an achievable goal in my mind, especially for the Panthers, especially when I look at the rest of the division. So, I definitely see this as being a good thing. And I like the potential, not even as a Panthers person, but just as a hockey fan, for some of these potential back to back or 2 games in a row against the same team. That's some like old style hockey that I think can really build up the rivalries.
mhm.
Game 2, you're going to see a lot more grit and a lot more pushing and shoving, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's kind of like baseball where you get like 3 and 4 game series against the same team. Yeah, you're going to build the rivalry. I mean, you look around the league overall. You mean to tell me that we're going to see Connor McDavid and Austin Matthews go head to head 9 or 10 times? We're going to see the Battle of Alberta 9 or 10 times. From a Florida perspective, we're going to see Bobrovsky go against Columbus 8 times. I mean, that there's some really intriguing opportunities out there. And I know Tortorella has brought it up in the past where he likes to see this sort of stuff, because if there's something that's missing in hockey, Katie, I think it's the rivalry factor. I think especially now it's really going to just rev a lot of different fan bases up. And I think it's going to make for a once in a lifetime season, just being that this looks like it's going to be a 1 year thing.
Yeah, I mean, now we'll see, you'll see Crosby and Ovechkin just as much as ever. But you're right. I think the rivalries are something that we've gotten away from, growing up being from Pittsburgh. I remember just hating the Flyers. At one point, one of my passwords, like for the security things, were like, name a sports team that you just absolutely hate. And I just immediately go Flyers, because that's what you're born to think when you live in Pittsburgh, is hate the
Mhm.
Flyers. And it doesn't feel that way anymore. And so I love those. I want those back. Being in Florida, being a team that hasn't been around quite as long, we don't have as much as those, those historical rivalries like other teams.
Mhm.
But I'm excited for us to try to build one. And like I said, we always see Tampa about 8 times a year, regardless. So it'll be pretty much business as usual with them.
Oh yeah, those games are always fun when they get together. That's for sure. So, we got 2 more questions for you, Katie. So, for those that are looking for the breakout star, maybe the player that, doesn't get the attention they deserve. Maybe they're, Florida's known as a little bit of a smaller market, so maybe they don't get as much attention paid to them. Who's that one player, not the Barkovs of the world, but somebody that could really come out and surprise some people, in your opinion?
Well, this year, I mean, I think there's a lot. I'd say, I always say, you never know what Nola Chari is going to do because my goodness, last year was just about as incredible of a season as ever. But
Yep.
for this one this year, just based on some of the research I've done, I'm gonna have to go with Carter Verhaeghe, who's our new acquisition
Mm,
from Tampa. He was in such a pigeonholed role there, being in that bottom six, because I mean, you look at their roster of forwards, it was impossible to crack that kind of a lineup. It still is. I mean, they are a powerhouse. So he wasn't necessarily getting those minutes or those opportunities, but when he was on the ice, he was very consistent and he was very helpful. And then you go back to his first, his AHL season where he led the league in points and goals. I mean, he was lights out.
yep.
If you give this guy an opportunity, I really think with the kind of skill that he brings and the speed and the creativity as a player, I think that he could be a real breakout person this year, given the fact that his increased opportunity and ice time is going to make a huge difference for his confidence.
Absolutely right. Now, that's a great call out too. Seeing him in the A, just everything that he seemed to touch turned to gold. And if he can find that consistency and he can get that role on the Panthers, which I think he can clearly get here, you never know. He could really have a nice season. So, and we're going to put you on the spot for this last one. So all the chips are down. We have the division. You mentioned they just have to finish in the top four. I think a lot of people realize that Tampa Bay's probably going to be that team that could finish first. Carolina is going to be a really good team. Dallas was in the Stanley Cup final last year. Nashville has that really good defense, and they're looking for a bounce back year this year. Chicago's got some young talent on the way. So all the chips are down. Do the Florida Panthers make the playoffs? And then ultimately, why or why not? Like, what's the biggest reason that they make it or don't make it?
I say yes, and I say yes knowing that it will not be easy. I mean, you just laid out exactly why. There are really no teams in this division, while it may be different, that aren't strong in some capacity.
Mhm.
You also have to factor in that this is a team with a high turnover right now, a lot of new players, and less time than ever to put it all together, show up for camp, and then 10 days later hit the ice for games that count. 56 games, every point will be important. But I feel like the why for me is that this team is full of guys on short-term contracts who are hungry. They all have something to prove, and they are going to do that. With the culture shift being in place from Zito, combined with a lot of guys who know that this year is important for them, to really make money in the future. I think between that and just wanting to prove it to themselves from a career standpoint, got a lot of young, hungry guys who are ready to make an impact, who are finally maybe going to be getting the opportunities they didn't in all the places that they're coming from. And I think when you put that all together, this is going to be a team that will be very fired up and hard to beat.
Absolutely. Couldn't have put it any better. And fans, if you want to follow Katie, make sure that you do. You can see her on Twitter at Katie_Gaus. She's on Fox Sports Florida. You'll see her on you may or may not see her on TV this year. Actually, how's that going to work for you?
So it should be home games. Unfortunately, we won't be traveling, but we'll have
Mhm.
28 home games, and I will be trying to do something for every single one of them. So whether I'm working for Fox, we're going to try to do some live streams of the games on our Twitch stream because we're really getting into the esports world now. So you'll find somewhere to watch me. But yes, Fox Sports for at least a good handful of them. I can't wait to be back at the BB&T Center.
Let's get this season going. Katie, thank you so much for joining the Hockey Writers Live and talking Panthers. We appreciate it, and good luck on the season.
Mark, take care. We'll see you guys.